everybody. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to the gathering. Right this very moment, I am right in the middle of co-producing a retreat that is happening in our home in Atlanta, Georgia. Technically, it's happening in our backyard to be COVID friendly, but we have 20 great participants who are here for 4 days of chanting and teaching and meditation and all different other modalities to promote the recognition and the celebration of our personal magnificence. It is a part of the vision of the nonprofit that I have started with my partner, J. Ram Lentini. It's called Nandidas, and the inception of this began during the 2020 pandemic. We wanted to find a way to blend our spiritual cultures. His is very much the Bhakti Yoga culture from his many years with his beloved teacher Ram Dass, and mine is from the metaphysical New Thought community steeped into religious science and the teacher Ernest Holmes. When we came together as a couple, we realized that there were this beautiful blend. There was this hybrid that would be a lot of fun to explore with regards to giving people access to our personal gifts. And so this weekend was the fruit of that intention. And there were many variations along the way because of COVID, but we came upon a great idea, and that was to have it in our home. So the backyard is transformed with all these tents and beautiful lights, and we have musicians here. And it's just been so rich and so vibrant. And it's evident how hungry people are for connection. So we feel like we're on the right track, and we feel like it's a beautiful inaugural way to bring tangibility to the dream that we share. We want you to be a part of that. We want you to know all about what it is that we're doing. So in the comments below, make sure you visit nandidas.com as we upgrade that and let you know of our calendar of events. But while this is happening, some observations that I want to give to you today. So there is this thing that we do, and it's called labeling. We label things. We label or we take identities about ourselves and we sort of carve it into stone. It's kind of something like I used to call monomorphic. Monomorphic always reminded me of Western medicine. You know the way that you get a diagnosis, and some people carve that diagnosis into stone and they say, this is who I am. It does become a part of their I am statement. And what was always puzzling to me about that as I began my own path of self-awareness was that really creates inertia for spirit to do what it wants to do through us from a very natural, empowering state of wholeness. But if I'm constantly going around identifying myself as this label, there isn't a lot of play in there. There's a built-in self-imposed rigidity. The other part of that then is something called polymorphic, where we experience a certain thing, let's say something more along the lines of what a naturopath would do. It looks at a present day symptom, but it treats it holistically, and it treats it from the perspective of bringing and restoring wholeness. So that's one thing. That's one expression of a label or an identity, is we take an external opinion or label and we define ourselves as that. Then there are these characteristics of our behavior. We can also take a characteristic of our behavior and turn it into a label as I am an introvert or I am an extrovert. So at this retreat, there is a blend of introverts and extroverts, like there always are. There are teachers, wisdom teachers, who are working with us who are extroverted as they teach, and then they are introverts when they are completed with that task. A natural hybrid. And I keep sitting with this idea of labels in both regards, the ones that we accept or adopt because the outside world has given it to us, and another are behavioral expressions that we also turn into a label or an identity. And so I talked about that a little bit today at the retreat. And I was aware of the story in Scripture where Jesus comes to visit the sisters, Mary and Martha. So Mary and Martha are sisters. There are many Marys in the Bible. This is this particular version of Mary. So they are sisters, and Jesus comes, and I felt as though this was similar to my partner and I preparing for the retreat. We got lots of people coming. Part of my identity that I love is an appreciation for cleaning and organizing and aesthetic and getting things just so, not necessarily to impress anybody. It isn't about that. It's because the detail in that mission to bring that to life brings me joy. I love it. I love it. And so if you're familiar with this story, Jesus comes, and Martha is the one who's very similar to me. She is preparing and cleaning the house and trying to make sure that the food is just right to accommodate and to meet all of the needs of Jesus during his visit. And Mary does none of that. Once Jesus comes into their home and his frequency, his vibration fills that space, she is immediately drawn to sit at his feet. And so that particular expression or that particular thing, to sit at the feet and to just soak up, to lose all awareness of anything else out there, that's not like my partner, but it is when he's in his bhakti yoga chanting. He has this beautiful ability to lose himself in the vibration and the calling of all of the sacred names of God. And that particular expression within him and the depth of that permeates in the way in which he relates to everybody. And meanwhile, I'm over here creating all this beautiful aesthetic, and then I go and then I'll teach. And so we have this beautiful hybrid. What works for us is that we look at each other and we celebrate both of those expressions. One is not better than the other. I know what it is that I love. I know the joy that the detail brings to me. He knows exactly how to cultivate that resonance and that vibration that's so holy, and to enroll people into singing and chanting in that way. And so each of us brings so much to the table, and it's a beautiful thing. Not so in the story of Mary and Martha. And this is where labels and identities kind of get skewed. So if you know this story, you know that Martha gets upset with Mary because Martha is busy. But Martha's activity, her label, her identity, is all about appearances. It's all about acceptability of what her role as a woman in this culture is to be. Mary could care less about that. You know, if you look at some of the scriptural dialogue around the archetypes of this story, what Mary was doing was very much against the rules. To sit at the feet of a master teacher was something that the man did. The role of the woman was to be the one that Martha was doing, to make sure that everything was perfect and right. And so Mary sort of busted through that archetype and sat down because she was so drawn and lost herself in the beauty and the nature and the vibrancy of Jesus. And so Martha gets upset, and Martha gets so upset that she kind of stops the proceedings, and she actually says to Jesus, "Are you not going to chastise my sister? Are you not going to tell her to get up and to help me? Because that's what she's supposed to be doing." And in the story, depending upon the way in which you explore it and the way in which the allegory hits you and all of the different interpretations, Jesus basically reminds Martha to kind of chill and to let her know that that what Mary is doing is just as holy as what she is doing. And that just came to me. And so we talked about that in the retreat today. We talked about the monomorphic labels sometimes that we have taken on because society tells us to. So there is this sort of Martha energy that we walk around in, doing what we think that we're supposed to do, but being resentful for it. The reason why that was so interesting to me was because I noticed that there has been growth within me. Because old me, decades ago, I would still be doing the same thing, cleaning and arranging and making sure everything was okay, but resenting it. And doing it mostly because the introvert within me didn't want to mingle. It wanted to be in the safety zone of a task that I didn't have to make a mistake in, or I didn't have to fumble in conversation, so I could hide in that role. That's important to see, to hide in the identity rather than being open. My partner is very much that Mary energy, just willing to lose oneself in the moment and forget all of the other details, and to be so fully present that it brings a richness in the exchange of the transmission that wants to happen. And so we look at that and we think, how he wants to go, how can I be more like Martha a little bit in the aesthetic? And I go, how can I be more Mary in the terms of the spontaneity and in terms of the transmission? And so we both look at each other as master teachers, because we see the value in that. I know that what I'm contributing is making all of the participants happy, and I know that what he is preparing and offering is making all of the participants happy. And then I think about hybrid, the hybrid nature, and how do you and I not curse the part of us that might be the Martha that wants to hide behind the task and the doing, and also not lose oneself in the Mary, and it's just so much in the being that the doing gets neglected. Now do you see where I'm going with this? And so the beautiful thing about this story and about labels is noticing how we make one better than the other. You know, if we classify someone as the doer, well, there are cultures and there are subsets of people who would praise that and say that's what needs to happen in order to get things done. And then there might be spiritual and religious subsets of individuals who say less doing, more being. What the problem is people need to learn to be more. And in the being, the doing just takes care of itself, which may very well be true. But a lot of times in this being, what I've seen and experienced with people is an old phrase called they're so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And all of a sudden I see, and this, we'll say that this is Mary to the extreme, that they just have no ability to do the human thing. To do the numbers, to have a house, to take care of people, to the family and all of that kind of stuff. They're sort of lost in this arena because they're in this high-mindedness that has no grounding. And when you look at both, when you look at Martha and Mary energy, you can see that when you and I allow both of those to hold equal importance, when you hold the being and the doing both in sacred space and honoring, that the roots that are cultivated from that then are deep and rich and powerful. All of us have a creative side. All of us have a divine expression. And that divine expression needs both the doing and the being. All of us have a physical body. And that physical body very much is optimized by both the doing and the being. If we're so in the heavenly mind and we neglect the body, then we are neglecting the instrument that is giving us the ability to go and to navigate through life. In our relationships, if we're so much about trying to do for other people but neglecting the being of ourself, then we realize that there's an agenda with all of this doing, and we're hiding our being. We're postponing doing our own inner work. And suddenly we see that it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can learn to fill our own cup. We can learn to hold ourselves in a place of deep respect as we learn to navigate and to be with other people. And then when we look at our prosperity, our flow, our abundant nature, we can participate in the doing, but letting go of the how and letting the being of that which is God do its thing. We show up, we do the work, and we let go of the doing in a way that the being can now have its version and its participation. Do you see how beautiful this is? This hybrid nature? All of the pillars that make up our human existence, the prosperity, the career, the health, the relationships, they all would work optimally if we allowed both the Mary and the Martha to have equal respect. And so no matter if you didn't know the story of Mary or Martha, or you did, it's a new interpretation or a different lens by which to look at that. Because often when I grew up in a religious environment, it was always told from the perspective that Martha was wrong, that all of Martha's doing was done from a place of vanity and self-interest, whereas Mary was the one who was righteous. But there is righteousness in the doing, just as there is righteousness in the being. There is a need for the doing, just as much as there is a need and a welcoming for both of those things in the being. And so today, I want you to examine the ways in which you might have a sort of monomorphic viewpoint about your role in the world, about the labels that you have accepted, about how you might be, if you are a doer, how you might be making that wrong because you heard a sermon or you heard a speaker or you read some inspirational material that talked about that from a negative perspective, much like my upbringing talked about Martha from a negative perspective. And see if you can begin to rework that in your mind. And if you are a doer, and if you lose yourself in doing because maybe you're trying to escape, maybe you're postponing looking at your being, don't make the doing wrong. In fact, celebrate that history of doing because it got you to where you are today. My doing began as a little boy, mowing lawns from the age of 6, because it was one way for me to gain some kind of autonomy, a way for me to try to earn money, a way for me to try to find myself in the midst of all of this chaos from my childhood. And so I remember pushing a lawnmower that was taller than me down the street, carrying and lugging some gas can. And that sense of doing, I have to do this in order to save myself, worked well for me. Sure, it went overboard. Sure, my doing was a lot of times as I aged through life was at my own expense. I did for other people in hopes that I would get something in return. There was an agenda to it. I did for people in hopes that I would experience their love because I didn't think the beingness of my love was enough. So many of us do that. We lose ourselves in the doing. But I don't want you nor myself to make that history wrong. Because again, it got us to where we are today. That Martha, that Martha on steroids behavior got us to where we are today. So I am in a place where I celebrate my doing. I celebrate the attention to detail, whether anybody notices it or not. I celebrate the beauty and the aesthetic of everything that I want to do to create a rich and beautiful retreat for people. And I also celebrate the fact that I can walk away and I can go on stage and I can teach, or I can participate and I can chant, and I can, for the first time in my life, welcome in fully that hybrid nature. It's so beautiful. My partner also can look at the way in which he escaped a lot of the doing in order to find solace in God because of his path of pain. I mean, he did his doing. He had to raise a family and all of that. But he went on a particular side of the pendulum that was far more being. And now he's looking at my doing and he's watching my joy in the doing. And I believe that I have a little bit of influence that as he's doing, he's finding joy. And so for those of you who might have been extreme beers in order to escape the doing, don't make it wrong. If you've been the one that has, gone to the ashrams and gone to the mountaintop and traveled away from the history of the conflict and of the pain and suffering, to just be in the presence of those types of atmospheres, that too served you well. I've had my own version of those also. My point, don't make any of it wrong. Don't make any of it wrong. And get to a place where you are welcoming the experience of that hybrid balance, the being and the doing. Allowing the label to not be monomorphic, but polymorphic. And begin to see that when you lean a little bit heavier towards one side or the other, that maybe ask yourself, am I doing this because I'm trying to hide or avoid it? And if so, how can I bring that other nature into my expression? If I just don't want to do because it's too overwhelming and it just paralyzes me and causes anxiety, and I just want to chant and meditate all day and escape all of that, then do that, but bring in an element of the human that must be done and allow that to be healed and not so scary, and to ask for help. And if you're a doer that keeps doing and avoiding all of the spiritual practice and the things that bring the calm and the connection, notice why it is that you might be doing that. Maybe it's because you believe that you're not good at it, or maybe you've tried it before and you've been disappointed, and so now you just think that it's not worth it. Well, realize that any of these things can make this wrong, or any of these things can become an excuse as to why you can't, but you can long for it. You got to bring a little bit more of the being in. One of the ways that you can do that is to still do your doing, but take your grip off. Cling less lightly to the outcome. Practice non-attachment. Isn't that the most amazing thing? That we do in the world, and we be in the world, and we let go of all attachment to the how. And we just continue to offer our gifts. As the doer, as the Martha, we continue to set the stage for something lovely. And as the beer, as the Mary, we allow ourselves to just sit and to receive whatever it is that wants to come from the experience. That, to me, is sweet and beautiful. That, to me, is something that I am celebrating in this moment, because it's actually being birthed inside of me. And I love it so much. And I know that the same can be true for you. Till next time, I will see you, and blessings. And we're going to update our website, nandidas.com, very, very soon, with a bunch of beautiful video and materials from this so that you can see what we're up to and follow us. Till then, take care. God bless.